Are we going to speak a little bit about Etruscan architecture? We know very little about it, but we do know is from Vitruvius, who was a Roman living in Roman times, but because the beginning time of the Etruscans was just before Romans, many of them were living at the same time. It took years for them to Romans take over the Etruscan cultures. The Etruscans selected prime spots to build, so well chosen that they continue to inhabit, making excavations almost impossible, as I mentioned in the last video. Among the early Etruscans, the worships of God took place in nature, just like in Greece, where they would have had a temple and they would have had the altar outside. And they created ritual spaces to enclose open to the sky with sacred boundaries carefully marked. Around 600 BCE, the desire to create structures for gods spread throughout the area, most likely as a result of Grecian temples, from the influence from the Greeks. Etruscan architecture was markedly different in material and in design from the Greeks. Same type of concept with the temple and columns, but really quite different. They had stone foundations, but the structures were made of wood, mud brick, and terracotta, which is quite different from the Greeks, who of course used marble. The columns and entablatures were made of tufa rock, or tufa stone, which is a volcanic ash, and it's easily excavated, but hardens to a concrete consistency on exposure to the atmosphere. So it was really quite hard, but to build with it was really wonderful. Tufa can be also cut into durable building blocks that require no firing. So you didn't have to go through all of the terracotta mess of having to use a kiln. It was used extensively by the Etruscans and Romans, and even today, tufa brick in the industry is quite flourishing in Italy today. Architectural remnants suggest that they are considerably used. The arch, which was profoundly important in Roman buildings. So it's interesting to know that the pre-Romans used the arch in their buildings. All right, so our first building we're going to talk about is the Temple of Minerva in Veii in Italy. This is 510 to 500 BCE. It is made of mud brick, tufa stone, or volcanic ash, and wood. And this is a reconstruction because we do not have any architecture left to know, to actually look at and to excavate. So our theme is sacred sites and rituals. Little is known of Etruscan temples except what we can glean from the Roman architect Vitruvius, who wrote about them extensively. The archaeology evidence from the Etruscan temples largely confirms Vitruvius' descriptions. They seem to be inspired by the Greek buildings with their post and lintel construction, post being the columns here, and the lintel, this being up here. So post and lintel construction going all the way back to Stonehenge. We've been talking about this since prehistoric times. And the pediments, which are here. This is a different kind of pediment, though, because it's an open pediment. There is no sculpture inside this pediment like you would have seen in Greece. And you have a cella, which is going in the back. You're going to have the cella for the statues, the cult statue for the deities, and also there's a porch here which we would not see in Greece. So this whole area here is called a porch, and that is something new as well. Let's go to the next page. One of the best known is the temple dedicated to the goddess Minerva, which in Roman is Minerva, and as the same in Greek it's Athena, which of course you're quite comfortable with, as we just left Athens, at the city of Veii, just outside of Rome. So the temple is divided into two parts. One part is up here where the porch is, which is this section. So here's the steps moving up, and these are columns, of course. And then you have here, which is the cella for the statues to go. So our columns are different as well. So let's go back to the previous slide and look at those columns, because this is the first time we've seen this extra column. It looks a lot like a Doric column, but it's not. This is called Tuscan, Tuscan. And if you look at the shaft of the column, there are no fluting, and there's a base. On a Doric column, there is no base. and there are shafts. The shafts are fluted. And there's a tasis. In a Doric, there is no entasis here. So there's no widening in the middle and going straight up. All right, let's flip to the next page. Here is another reconstructive. This is actually a 3D form that you can actually see and look at. And the division of space was designated for the different gods. So within each cella would have been a different god. So there would have been 3 gods or goddesses, or a combination of the 3. The temple was built on a high platform, which is also different. So you have this platform that was built on, and you have one entrance, as opposed to in a Greek temple, they all look the same. The whole sides, they all look the same. So they have the sterobate going up to the stylobate, and all would have looked the same, the front, the back, the sides. A flight of stairs leads up to the entrance from the south side and were brightly painted, just like the Greeks, just like the Egyptians. Unlike the Greeks, though, they had stairs on all 4 sides, right? So there's stairs on 4 sides, and this one, there's just stairs in the front. There's an emphasis on the elaborate entrance rather than on the sides. And the sculpture, which is very important and different, is the sculpture is on the top of the temple, as opposed to being in the pediment, where the Greeks would have put their sculptures here. They would have put it on a frieze if it was an Ionic temple. But here, the Etruscans are putting it on top of the temple. And they most likely would have been made of terracotta, not marble, of course. Let's go to the next page. Despite the short-lived nature of Etruscan sculptures, their temple design had a huge impact on the Renaissance architecture, which is to come in the future. Probably around January, we'll see that. Let's go to the next one. So the most important thing about this is looking at the difference between these. We have here the Doric, and here we have is the Tuscan. So you can see the fluting here with the Doric, no fluting, smooth here. The capital itself looks very, very similar, but again, there is no base on a Doric column, and there is a base on a Tuscan. Here the Ionic is very, very similar from one to the other. You can just see that it looks a little bit smaller. And the difference here, this is called a composite, which we'll get into later. And it looks very similar to the Corinthian, except the volutes are a little bit bigger.